welcome back to the Angletopia podcast. Longtime listeners will know a few weeks ago that we announced that one of the big changes we would be having this season is that we're going to have our first guest. And today we have our first guest. And so I would like to welcome Laura Curtin from English Cottage Vacation. English Cottage Vacation is a new type of travel company. They own a cottage in the Dorset countryside, and when you book a stay with them, they kind of handle everything for you and give you a full immersive travel experience. And they'll take you from the airport, they'll take you to see the sights, they'll feed you your meals. Laura's an award-winning chef. And I've invited Laura to be a guest on the Angletopian podcast so she can talk about their offering, as well as talk about travel in England and how Americans can make the most of it these days. Full disclosure, English Cottage Vacation is an Angletopia sponsor, but they have not paid to be on this podcast. So, welcome, Laura.
Thank you very much, Jonathan. It's great to be here. And thank you so much for asking me on. So you said you've really covered what we do very well in your introduction. But just to elaborate a little bit, yes, we cater for everything. From the moment that our guests inquire, it's Nathan, my husband, and I that take care of all inquiries, giving our guests and inquirers the information they require to make a decision about whether they'd like to book with us. And then from the moment that they book, we take care of the rest. So if we have a couple of different packages, which we can come on to a little bit later, but depending on which package our guests decide to book, we end up planning and creating the entire itinerary. So for example, we have some set itineraries, but we also have our flagship tailor-made itinerary. And this is the sort of all singing, all dancing itinerary where we go through what we call a discovery process with our guests once they've booked. We go back and forth asking questions about what they want to see, what their interests are, what their dreams of England include. And then we create, with our obviously in-depth knowledge of our area and outside area, and a really tailor-made and perfect itinerary for our guests. And it can include anything. Anything along the lines of must-see sites, you know, that are your usual, if you Googled what to see in England, would pop up on the top 50, to really, really off the beaten track things that you'll never find on the internet that can only be known by the locals. Really the sky's the limit on activities and excursions. And of course, then there's also just the wonderful sitting and relaxing at the cottage, being catered to, hand, foot and finger, drink in hand, beautiful canapes and meals, and enjoying the surrounding countryside that Well Cottage sits in.
That sounds ideal. Sign me up. I'm already sold. I'm already sold.
Well, you are coming to visit at some point, aren't you? On your next visit to England, hopefully.
Yeah. We've got to book in when we come to Dorset next, because it's. I like the idea of being taken care of. So what is your and Nathan's background, and what inspired you to start English Cottage Vacation?
Okay, so our background together as a couple, so when we met, we decided we were both into water sports and any activities on the water, and so we decided to enter into the yachting industry. And so very quickly, 15 years ago now, we decided we wanted to be yacht charter crew. And so that's what we did. I became chef, Nathan captain. We both got our qualifications to do so. And we did that then for the following 10 years on yachts in and around the Caribbean and throughout the Med. And that obviously gave us a huge amount of experience as yacht crew, but predominantly in the hospitality industry, because yachting industry is the creme de la creme of hospitality. It's where you know and can expect the best service, attention to detail, and catering from your vacation and your crew. And so throughout that, predominantly our guests were from the US and from Canada, and often we had these conversations with our guests, because obviously we were from England, about their love of England and how they'd visited. And often we were coming across the fact that people had been to England, but they'd just been to London. London is fabulous, don't get me wrong. There is definitely a lot to see in London, but it's not what we as Brits consider the real England. The quintessential thatched cottage, countryside England. You know what I'm talking about because I know you've experienced it already, hey, Jonathan. But there's just nothing like it. And especially throughout our main season from May until the end of October, just the landscape, the green, the flowers, the colours, and just the wildlife is just absolutely incredible. And so we thought, well, nobody's experiencing this. I mean, that is just sacrilege, really. We were looking to leave the yachting industry to be closer to our families again, because we had nieces and nephews growing up that we wanted to be close to and get to know properly. And so we thought, what can we do when we move back to England? What jobs are we going to do? It's very hard for yacht crew to find something that they want to do outside of the yachting industry because it's so unique. It's such a unique lifestyle. And we loved it. So we thought, well, let's just do exactly the same as we do on yachts, but on land in England. And let's provide this absolutely wonderful, all-inclusive experience where our guests just literally, all they have to do is book and then look forward to their vacation, and we take care of everything, including them when they're with us at our cottage. Yeah, we embarked on that journey, and in 2019, we finally, after visiting about, I don't know, it must have been about 70 houses, we finally found Well Cottage, which is an 18th century thatched cottage. And it's situated right in the heart of the Dorset countryside, surrounded by rolling hills. We're actually right on the edge of an area of outstanding natural beauty known as the Cranbourne Chase. It just offers everything and anything. It's just the perfect place for us to be able to create a really beautiful tailor-made itinerary. And it's only 2 hours transfer by car from London, which of course we also include in our packages.
Now, yeah, so obviously the center of your offering is Well Cottage. So, we'll put a link in the show notes so people can see pictures of it. It's a beautiful, lovely, picturesque cottage. And so I'm curious, do you know any more about the history of the cottage? Do you know, are there interesting stories from the previous owners that might interest Americans to give some color?
So we haven't experienced any ghosts yet, which I'm really not happy about, because I feel like that would be like amazing. But I guess some people would think that was a bonus. We don't have a ghost. The actual cottage was built in the 1700s, but we don't know the actual date. We have an archives society here in our local village of Fontmell Magna, and we've obviously been to them. They know everything about this area possible, and there's no archives of when the property was actually built down to, the actual date. But it definitely was 1700s, and it was originally built, so the original part of the house, which is the 18th century part of the house, was originally built as a drover's cottage. And so a drover's cottage basically means it's built as almost like an Airbnb. But back in those days, they obviously didn't have to book and pay online for it. They would come along with their cattle or whatever it was they were moving through and trading with towards London, and they would be able to stay in these drovers' cottages and rest until they moved on the next day. And so there was always an area for the cattle to be placed next to the cottage, and then you'd have the main part of the cottage, which at that stage did have 2 stories, funnily enough, and a massive inglenook fireplace, because of course that's how they cooked, got their warmth and everything to be able to survive inside in those days. And of course it was also thatched back in those days as well. I am told, though we don't have photo evidence unfortunately, but I am told from the Archive Society that it also went through a period of having a tin roof at one point until it was then thatched again, I think back in the early 1900s. And then the people that we bought it off of, they had moved into it once it had been extended quite substantially, and then they added on the kitchen and garden room, which is just a fabulous area for our guests to relax in. The greatest thing about our cottages, it's 18th century in the heart, so it has all the low ceilings and the really wonky floors and the inglenook fireplace, but the extensions are fairly modern. So it gives a really lovely balance of really luxurious, modern, comfortable accommodation, but at the same time, it's got that history and it's got all the things you want to find in a thatched cottage, you know?
Yeah, that's really nice because I've stayed in more than one cottage in England and in Ireland where they hadn't really been updated for the modern time, and it was really rough. So it's nice to know that you balance the modern with the history because that makes
Yes.
it a much more comfortable travel experience.
Absolutely. And something with that, that when we found this cottage, we immediately knew it was perfect in so many ways. But one of the main things was because each of our rooms, when the building was extended, each of the rooms was given its own bathroom. And that's
Oh,
a
nice.
major thing to be able to offer to our
Yeah.
guests because we looked at so many cottages that obviously they don't have the capacity to be able to put in a bathroom, not even just on a space side of things, but because the building is so old, either it's listed, meaning that you couldn't actually get planning permission to put a bathroom in, but just because the walls are too delicate, you know, that kind of thing, that you couldn't be bashing anything around to create the necessary area and space to do it. So to find an 18th century thatched cottage that had been extended, accommodated this for our guests was just incredible. And our guests love it. So, yeah, we're so glad.
So you mentioned that it's a thatched cottage. Now you've owned it. You said for 13 years or 15 years. I'm sorry.
No, only since 2019.
Oh, okay. So have you had to have it rethatched since you bought it?
No, we haven't. So when we bought it, it hadn't long been rethatched. It
Okay.
had, when we bought it, it had about 15 years left on the thatch, which is relatively
Okay.
good because thatches tend to last between 20 and 30 years. So there's two parts to a thatch. There's the ridge, which is the top piece, which is usually the decorative piece on top of the thatch. And then there's the main thatch. And they're equally as important. But the ridge, being that it's the highest point and takes most of a battering, needs to be replaced a little bit sooner, usually every sort of in between, I don't know how I'm going to explain that, but do you know what I mean? Like, so if we have to have the thatch done
Yeah.
every 30 years, we have to have the ridge done every 15 years. And so every 30 years, you have the whole thing done, and every 15 years, you have the ridge done. Does that make sense?
Yeah. It's so fascinating. I mean, our roofs last 30 years, but they're nowhere near as beautiful as a thatch roof. So
Yeah. And we do,
you're in.
yeah,
You
sorry.
said so. You said you're in Fontmell Magna. Tell us about the village. What's it like? What's there to see and do in the village itself? Is there a pub? Is there a shop? You know, what is there?
It gets better, Jonathan, honestly. So, and I love talking about this because every time I talk about the attributes of English cottage vacation, I just gleam because it's like the quintessential dream. So we live so the cottage is in Bedchester, which is a hamlet 1 mile away from Fontmell Magna, which is our main
Okay.
village. And it has a shop, it has a beautiful pub, it has a little school, a little primary school. It has a magnificent church called St Andrews, and it is a beautiful church. I mean, for our size village, it stands looking over the village. It's just quite something. So yeah, we have all of the amenities that a village could possibly want. It still has, it's lined with thatched cottages. It still has that really lovely English village feel. It has a beautiful river running through it. We have 3 mills within Fontmell Magna, which is where the name of Fontmell Magna actually came from. And please don't ask me because I've completely forgotten what Fontmell Magna stands for, but I do know it came from the word Funtamel. Funtamel. But I'm going to have to ask. Nathan's so good at this history stuff. I'd have to ask him to remind me what Fontmell actually stands for.
Yeah, that's always the interesting thing about place names, especially in Dorset, is they're not immediately apparent what they actually mean. You're like, what a
No.
unique name. I've been through Fontmell Magna. It's beautiful. That's my favorite area in England, Dorset, and if you could, we highly recommend anybody spend as much time there as they possibly can. Give it a week,
So
give it 2 weeks.
yeah, so I know you've been to Shaftesbury maybe once, maybe more times than that. Is that correct?
Way more than that. So probably
Oh,
a
okay.
dozen times.
Yeah, and
So
so
we've driven the roads and.
Would it be correct to say that
Go
it's
ahead.
one of your favourite places in England, being that you've been there quite a few times?
Yeah, it is the favorite place. Oh, it
Oh,
is.
brilliant.
Yeah, back during the dark days of COVID and lockdowns, and all I wanted to do was to be in Shaftesbury and be on the edge of the Cranbourne Chase where you're also at, and
Yeah.
I even wanted to go so bad that at one point I sent a video guy, to go shoot an HD video of Gold Hill just so I could see what it was like while I wasn't there. And when I returned to England for the first time after the pandemic and back in 2022, Shaftesbury was the first place I went. I mean, the driver literally came from Shaftesbury, picked me up at the airport, and took me to Shaftesbury. So it was great.
Fantastic. Well, Shaftesbury's only 4 miles from us, and it is again,
Nice.
it's just a quintessential English little town with it's a market town, in fact. So they have their market, I think it's every other week. And as you said, it has Gold Hill, which is one of the most photographed views in England. It's a cobbled
Yeah.
street that's very steep. And so you look down these thatched cottages, and then beyond is the beautiful views of the Cranbourne Chase, just as you mentioned. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I remember when I, first discovered the place. Everyone thought it was in Yorkshire, but everyone's surprised to discover that it's in Dorset, and it's the highest town in
Well,
England. Yeah.
you know why they thought it was in Yorkshire, because the Hovis advert, right? You must know about the Hovis advert.
Yeah. Yes.
So
yes.
that actually themed the accents from Yorkshire, if I remember correctly. And so yes, it was assumed that it was filmed in Yorkshire, but of course, yeah, it was Shaftesbury.
Those are definitely not West Country accents.
No, well, you can definitely hear my West Country accent, that's for sure. Because originally Nathan and I are from Somerset, whereas we obviously live now in the county of Dorset. But they are right next to each other and only an hour away from where we both grew up and met. But yeah, we definitely have our Somerset accent still. Not even the Caribbean beat that out of us.
I could detect it. Even the way you say Dorset is
Dorset,
very
yeah.
West Country.
I fit in with
You're
all the
authentic
farmers
local.
around here. It's absolutely fine. Yeah, absolutely.
So, when you're booking what your clients want to see when they come to your cottage or when they're planning their trip, what are some of the most common things that they want to come see and do?
So we have, of course, our what I would call the most popular sites that people want to see. These include places like the Roman city of Bath, the Cotswolds, of course, the Jurassic Coast, which includes the Thomas Hardy country. But we also have some places that we recommend locally that perhaps our guests have never heard of, but once they have done a little bit of research on them themselves, or obviously taken into account our advice on them, such as Sherborne, which is a local town to us, which again is just the most beautiful little town, very quintessential, but also has castles and an abbey, and it's just got so much to see whilst you're there. Of course, there's Stonehenge. I mean, who can forget Stonehenge? That's only 40 minutes away from us. So we usually book a VIP tour of Stonehenge so that our guests can get up close and personal with the stones. And yeah, I could talk for hours, and I don't want to go on and on, but we have gardens galore surrounding us. So if people are interested in gardening, then we can certainly take them to Stourhead House and Gardens.
I was going to say Stourhead is nearby.
Yeah, that's just down the road. We've got a safari park about half an hour away from us, which is called Longleat, and that's been very popular, especially when we have children come, because obviously it offers a really lovely experience for children, but also adults. It's not just children that like to visit.
Well,
so,
have you had any damage to your car from the monkey pens?
Funnily, you should say that. A guest that left last week, they actually visited last year with their children, and they did Longleat. And when Nathan drove them through the monkey section, the monkeys were sat at the time to the side of the car, and they videoed this. It was so funny. And they were all laughing and joking that the monkeys seemed to be interested in chewing on something. Then when the monkeys got up and sat on the wing mirror, and they realised that the monkeys were chewing on numbers off of our number plate, which was hilarious because you could hear in the video, all of a sudden everyone goes, that's our number plate. Oh, it's a C, it's a V, because we have a personalised number plate that's ECV for English Cottage Vacation. So yes, we have had damage, but luckily that was all we had to do was get new number plates. So
yeah, about 10 years ago we did the Longleat Safari Park with our very young toddler, and we had a rental car with us, and we drove into the monkey enclosure, and we saw all the warnings saying you enter at your own risk, the monkeys will jump on your car. And we're like, oh, it'll be fine. And then the monkeys jump on the car, and they started tearing bits of the rental car off. We're like, God, I'm glad I bought the insurance.
Once you're in, you're in. There's nothing you can do about it. Yeah. But that's why it's so great to have Nathan drive you, because you don't have to worry about it.
Yeah,
you don't have to worry about your rental car.
Yeah, you can just laugh about it.
You've already paid for it. Yeah.
And I'm glad you brought up those attractions, because that to me is a great selling point, not only for your cottage but also the area that you're in. It is a very wonderful area to be for lots to see and do. And like I said, I've been there over a dozen times, and I still haven't done everything that we've wanted to see and do in that area. And you're within an hour's drive from so many beautiful places. You're within an hour of the coast, hour of Bath, hour of the Cotswolds, and it's such a beautiful part of England, because there's very few motorways, very few busy highways. It's very quiet, and then there's lots of rolling hills, and it's great. I love it.
Yeah, we're the only county actually without a motorway running through it, so it's a very quiet area.
And I remember when I first visited Shaftesbury back in 2004. Now that's aging me a bit, and we stayed at a bread and breakfast called The Retreat in Shaftesbury. One of the first things the proprietor told us is like, Dorset, we're the only county without a motorway. So
yeah, that's our claim to fame. One of our claim to fame.
Which means that you're never in a hurry to get anywhere in Dorset, because you can't go anywhere fast, which is great, because we love slow travel. We love traveling like a local, and it's so nice to travel down all the country lanes and then just have to slow down, because you miss so much when you're on the motorways.
Absolutely. And again, the beauty of what we do with Nathan, with your luxury car and Nathan being a driver, is that you do just get to sit back and let Nathan do the driving, do the reversing when necessary, when you're on a single lane, and take care of all of it. You can really take everything in and enjoy it. Or you can just chat to Nathan and ask him questions.
Well, and that's I know a lot of Americans have a lot of anxiety about driving in the UK. It's, because it's on the opposite side of the road, you're on the opposite side of the car. Yeah. The roads are very narrow. No offense, the English people drive really fast on really narrow country roads, and it's like, it can be pretty terrifying. So that's what's really nice about what you offer, is you could just sit back and enjoy the ride rather than have worried about crashing into a hill.
Absolutely.
So thinking about the typical customers you get at your cottage, what are some of your top tips that you give them for traveling in England? What are some of the things to make the most of their trips?
That's quite a difficult one to answer, only because we are so adept at catering for individual requirements. So the first thing that we do is we find out from our guests exactly what it is that they're wanting to experience and how they're wanting to experience England. Then we can start to advise on the suited activities and excursions that they can fit in a relaxed and stress-free way. Because we will fit in as many excursions into an itinerary as our guests want. But of course, we're also experts in knowing what a good balance is, so that they can really have the maximum time of relaxation as well. So,
Right.
yeah, it's a bit of a difficult one to answer in that way because everybody's different. If they're traveling as a couple or they're traveling as a group, a family with young children or a group of friends, it can really be different. But I think essentially what we offer here at the cottage really covers everyone's real desires, which is to experience the real England. And that's what we really cater to. Not only in the location, the cottage, the excursions, but also being that me and Nathan are, we're English people, for want of a better term.
Well, and that's
Born and bred.
you make a good point. You make a really good point there about doing too much, and I know because it costs so much for Americans and North Americans to come visit England. There's this feeling that you have to cram your trip with as much to do as possible to make it worth it. And over the years, we used to do that, but recently, last few years, we've kind of dialed it back because, you can see 3 stately homes and gardens in a day, but you're not going to be able to move the next day.
That's right.
You want to you want to savor these things rather than just trying to cram everything in, because if you cram everything in, you're not going to have a nice holistic experience where you make good memories. You're just going to be rush, rush, rush.
Yeah, absolutely, because it is all about taking in the atmosphere and the experience, isn't it? It's not just about how much can I see. Well, it might be for some people, but for most people, it's also about feeling England. You know how we see it on. It's like me seeing American movies and wanting to feel that feeling you get when you're watching American movies, if you like. People want to feel that real English feeling they get from movies. And by just taking stock of where you are and what you're seeing, even if it's just by sitting in the garden at the cottage, it gives you those memories, doesn't it, to come back to, and just, you know what it's like when you've got this nostalgic memory that just makes you think, England, it was so, whatever the explanatory words are.
Well, and as kids say these days, we're just here for the vibes,
Yeah.
And
Well, there you go. Exactly.
England's full of good vibes. Nostalgia is a good point as well. Like when we came in 2012 for the Diamond Jubilee, we came for several weeks, but we had a 6-month-old child in tow with us, and while we were traveling, it was, let's just say, not great. It was really hard. It was our first time traveling with a baby. We didn't know what we were doing, and a whole trip was a learning experience. But when I look back on it now, I'm like, oh, that trip was so wonderful.
Rose-tinted glasses, as they say.
Yeah. So, and I know we've talked about this before when we previously chatted. So what are some exciting events going on this year in your area? Like, I know Guy Ritchie's having his own private air show. Like, what else is going on that people can come see if they come stay at your cottage?
Yes. Wow. Oh my gosh. Again, there's an event going on at every possible, excursion and site that you can mention throughout the year. Gardens usually have some sort of garden event. I mean, Highclere Castle. I haven't even mentioned Highclere Castle yet. But Highclere Castle has events going on all throughout the year. And obviously it depends when our guests book, because they have to have booked on where their dates fall on an event that we can recommend to them. But the one that you mentioned, for example, Guy Ritchie's inaugural air show event is happening this August. And that's very exciting because we have a little airfield that's about 2 miles away from Well Cottage. And the little planes fly every so often over the top of the cottage, which is lovely. And you can also go up there and have a nice cream tea and, watch the planes taking off and things. And since Guy Ritchie's taken it over, he's really made a push to upgrade the facilities there and also to put on new events. And so this new event is quite exciting, and we are really excited to take our guests to it this year. And of course, they will have the best tickets. So that's important to note.
Well, yeah, I'm glad you brought up Compton Abbas Airfield, because you can now do Spitfire flights from Compton Abbas.
Yes.
And so if you've ever wanted to fly in a Spitfire, you can now do it there.
You can, absolutely.
Which is...
Let us know. We'll get it organised within your time with us.
Yeah. Don't tempt me. So what are some things you wish international travelers knew before they travel to the UK, or what would be helpful for them to know what to expect when they come to the deep to the English countryside?
Well, first of all, the main difference, or one of the main differences between us and the US, of course, is the tipping system. Now, in the big cities, of course, tipping is getting more and more of a thing. But really, here in rural England, we don't see so much of it. I mean, restaurants, they may add a tip onto the bill, but it's not standard to tip like you do in America. We might leave a few quid on the table, you know, after leaving, but we certainly don't work out our 15, 20%, you know, before we leave the restaurant. And I think that's a wonderful thing personally, because it takes a lot of stress away from our clients having to think, right, we're coming to England. Okay, we paid for all inclusive. That's great. So we've got nothing else to pay. Hang on, we do need to take some cash to tip. But actually, you don't need to at all. So when we say all inclusive, we mean all inclusive. Like literally, you don't need to bring any money for tipping whatsoever. That's not to say that people don't appreciate it, mind you, but it's just not something that we even think about, you know? Excuse me. So that's one thing that I do feel that it's because our guests, bless them, they still really want to tip because it's so ingrained in your culture. Do you know what I mean? And it's not a bad thing that is the case, but it's hard to get across that literally you don't need to. Literally, you do not need to bring another penny with you when you have booked our vacations. So that's one thing.
I'm glad you brought tipping up because it is so ingrained in American culture that you are just expected to tip for everything. And now even post-pandemic, there's things that we never used to tip for that now we have to tip for. And so it's a breath of fresh air when you come to England because you're like, oh, I don't have to tip, or the service is already in the bill. Oh, okay, that's so weird. Like it's almost alien to where one of the most popular travel articles on our website is the article about tipping procedures in the UK.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. It's like everything. If you're given something because you've done a good job, you're always going to be really grateful for it. But because the expectation isn't there, if you're not tipped, you don't even give it another thought. You know, it just is what it is. Yeah. And we've worked in the US, so we know we've experienced, you know, the tipping side of the US, and I guess for the culture, it's just you don't even think about it on the other side, right? But it is, and that's what makes it such a wonderful relief when you're like, oh my God, I don't even have to think about that.
Yeah. Well, that's, and I'm glad you brought up cash. I have, you know, it's been 2 years since I've been to the UK, and I know post-pandemic that a lot of places actually don't want cash anymore. So Americans can now rely mostly on their credit cards and debit cards when they pay for things. So do you find your guests are not even getting cash these days?
We don't even recommend them bringing any, to be honest, because like you say, most things can be paid for by credit card, but there's really nothing for them to need to buy unless they're buying souvenirs, which of course, you know, some of our guests do buy quite a lot of souvenirs, but they use their credit cards. So, yeah, I mean, we have this conversation because we are asked the question quite a lot, you know, how much cash I should bring, and we always say, well, minimal. You really don't need anything.
Well, and it can be really hard to get British currency here in the US. You used to be able to just go down to your local bank and get British currency, but most banks don't do that anymore. The foreign exchange places in the airports, they charge a fortune for British currency. We just recommend people get £100 out of the ATM when they get to Heathrow, and then that should carry them for a few days because you don't need
very
cash.
True.
You know. Yeah. So any more travel tips for wayward Americans?
Tips for wayward Americans. I mean, again, it's like, because we cater for everything, it's hard to say, because I'd say things like, oh, you know, about the driving on the other side of the road, or the small lanes, or the high hedges. That might be something. One thing that we really care for here is our hedgerows, because a lot of our wildlife lives in our hedgerows. Because our lanes or our roads are so small, most roads have a hedgerow either side. So you could be driving along a road that has the most magnificent views, but at certain times of the year, you may not be able to see them. Now, Nathan is very good at knowing where the stop spots are to be able to pull over and so that guests can see these wonderful views. But it always takes their breath away that you're literally enclosed in a road because the hedges are often so high. Obviously, this time of year, they're still quite low because they get cut in and around March time. But then they're let grow really for the rest of the year so that the birds can nest and so on.
Yeah. Yeah, I know when you look at the landscape of England from the air when you're coming in for landing, you see the patchwork quilt of the countryside.
Yeah.
What most people don't realize is that patchwork is made by hedgerows, and that there in a lot of places those hedgerows are where a lot of the rich wildlife lives, when especially in farming areas where a lot of the original wilderness has been cleared away. And so that's always worth stopping to see a hedgerow, and you got to be careful. You might see a pheasant run out of them. I've seen that's happened to us if we've been driving there.
Absolutely, or a deer. You know, because we've got such small roads here, deers cross the roads quite often, so you have to watch out for deer. I mean, cows. We live next to a farm. In fact, we're right centrally in a farming area, and so we are surrounded by fields that are owned by farmers, and we often have cows literally staying in the field next to us, which is really cute because they look over the hedge and say hello. Often the farmer will be taking them from one field to another, which happens to need to go across the lane. And so that's quite interesting. I'm sure that happens in the US in places, in farming areas. Yeah. So not that different, but you have to watch out because you can't see them coming from the hedges.
Now, one of the things that Americans are really interested in British culture is the royal family. And so do you get a lot of guests wanting to see royal sites? What royal sites are around your area that people want to see?
Well, actually, it's funny. We haven't had yet any guests that have been particularly interested in the royal family. But what we do recommend, because majority of the royal family interest is in and around London, we do recommend that they stop a night or two, either prior to coming to the cottage or after, so that they can, and we can help them. We have a contact in London who just knows everything about London, to help them design their itinerary based around the royal family and the excursions and the sites there, to really get the best out of that interest. I mean, there are sort of interesting places around here, such as places that, you know, the Queen has visited or stayed, or the royal family in general in history and so on. But definitely London is the place to be when it comes to an interest in the royal family.
This has been a fascinating chat. Thank you so much for taking the time to speak to us. Is there anything you want to communicate to Americans about travel and culture in Britain that you really want them to take away and say, hey, come book your trip?
I think what we really have a passion for is showing our guests, no matter where in the world they are from, it just happens to be majority from the US and Canada. We just want to be able to show them literally the rawness of England, the rawness of rural England, and give them a real culturally immersive experience of England, as they will have seen in the movies. The Holiday being one that's mentioned to me very often. It really is very similar to the scenes that they show in movies like that. And we work really hard to make sure that our guests take that away. But not only that they also take away a really unique experience where they feel like they've just had the most relaxing holiday full of all the things that they absolutely love. And to be able to go back and tell their friends about what England really is, that it is really like you see in the movies, and that there is an opportunity where you can do it no matter if you're a solo traveller, a couple, a family of up to 6, or a group of friends of up to 6. You can go and see it and not have to worry about a thing, just enjoy your quality time together, experience in England in the best way possible.
Well, I'm sold. Sign me up. It sounds fantastic. I mean, traveling like a local is really what we espouse these days at Angletopia, because we love the countryside, we love the architecture, we love the cottages, we love the culture, and we love the warm welcome that we always get when we visit the countryside. we will wrap it up here, and we will encourage people to look at the show notes and visit the English Cottage Vacation website and get in touch with them and book your own dream trip to England. And so, thank you so much for your time, Laura.
Thank you so much, Jonathan. It's been wonderful, and we look forward to having you stay. Perhaps we could do another little in-person chat when you're here next time, and show a little tour of the cottage as well. That would be great. But yes, thank you so much. Really, really appreciate it. And yeah, chat to you again soon.
Perfect. Thank you so much.